I will sacrifice protecting my country. In Myanmar, a new resistance rises day by day. In a jungle in the borderlands of Myanmar, the troops sweated through basic training. They learned how to load a rifle, pull the pin of a hand grenade and assemble a firebomb. These cadets are not members of Myanmar's military, which seized power last month and quickly imposed a battlefield brutality on the country's populace. Instead, they are an eclectic core of students, activists and ordinary office workers who believe that fighting back is the only way to defeat one of the world's most ruthless armed forces. I see the military as wild animals who can't think and are brutal with their weapons, said a woman from Yangon, Myanmar's biggest city, who was now in the forest for a week of boot camp. Like others who have joined the armed struggle, she did not want her name published for fear that the Tatmadaw, as the Myanmar military is known, would target her. Advertisement. After weeks of peaceful protests, the front line of Myanmar's resistance to the February 1st coup is mobilizing into a kind of guerrilla force. In the cities, protesters have built barricades to protect neighborhoods from military incursions and learned how to make smoke bombs on the internet. In the forests, they are training in basic warfare techniques and plotting to sabotage military-linked facilities. The boldness and desperation of this new front recalls the radicalization of a previous generation of democracy activists in Myanmar, who traded treatises on political philosophy for guns. As in the past, the hardline opposition is a defensive response to the military's mounting reign of terror. The Tatmadaw has cracked down on peaceful protesters and unarmed bystanders alike, killing at least 275 people since the coup, according to a monitoring group. Other forms of resistance have continued in Myanmar. A mass civil disobedience campaign has idled the economy, with a nationwide strike on Wednesday leaving towns devoid of business activity. In creative acts of defiance, protesters have lined up rows of stuffed animals and origami cranes as stand-ins for demonstrators who could get shot. But there is a growing recognition that such efforts may not be enough, that the Tatmadaw needs to be countered on its own terms. Last week, remnants of the ousted parliament, who consider themselves the legitimate government, said that a revolution was needed to save the country. They have called for the formation of a federal army that respects various ethnic groups, not just the majority Bamar. If diplomacy fails, if the killings continue, the people of Myanmar will be forced to defend themselves, said Dr. Sasa, a spokesman for the ousted parliament who is on the run after having been charged with high treason. Any such movement will have to contend with a military that has ruled Myanmar by force for the better part of 60 years and has fought dozens of insurgencies for even longer. The Tatmadaw's bloodthirst is notorious. Senior General Min Aung Hlaing, the army chief who led the coup, has repeatedly commanded the extermination of entire villages, most chillingly the ethnic cleansing of Rohingya Muslims. The country has trembled as the Tatmadaw has brought its war machine to the cities, imprisoning Myanmar's civilian leaders last month and erasing a decade of political and economic reform. Since then, dozens of young protesters have been killed by single gunshots to the head. Security forces have fired into homes at random, leaving families cowering in back rooms. On Tuesday, a 7-year-old girl sitting at home in her father's lap was shot in the city of Mandalay, in what appeared to be a collateral death. Hundreds of protesters were released on Wednesday after weeks of detention. The Tatmadaw is flouting the international rules of war. Security forces have fired at ambulances and tortured detainees. Given the brutality, members of Myanmar's front line of democracy say there is no choice but to take up arms. Most days in the concrete conflict zones of Yangon, Koso Winnayan, a 26-year-old sailor, prepares for war, a GoPro camera affixed to his helmet, a balaclava over his head, vials of tear gas in his vest pockets, a sheathed sword on his back and a gas mask at the ready. His weapon of choice is a firework fashioned into a sort of grenade.